Hey everybody, welcome back to your Donna Jones podcast. I'm Don Zoldi, your host and the CEO of P3 Tech Consulting. We are knee deep in a month dedicated to this theme of autonomy reimagined and sponsored by UAvionics. We are just a little bit more than a week out from AUVSI Xponential 2023 in Denver, Colorado, where Doodle Labs had an incredible presence. And today we have with us Amol Parikh from Doodle Labs to talk a little bit about what they're doing and how the show went for them. So Amol, great to have you on the show.
Thank you so much. Good to see you again.
Absolutely. Now, you had an amazing booth. In fact, I commented in the aisle, there was this little square. It said Doodle Labs this way in the expo hall. So I followed the arrow and I found you guys. You had a banner on your booth that said data links for everyone. Tell us about that.
That's right. Well, yeah, for us, we had a great show and we were really happy to be there. And this is actually, you mentioned that tile. This is the first year that we really rolled out our new branding. So I'm glad you enjoyed it, and we actually heard that a lot. So that was awesome to hear and see. The data links for everyone was really a tagline that does encompass, I think, our ethos. Where we design and have for 20 plus years, just long range, high performance RF products. But we've always had a focus that spans both commercial and government. And there's always been dual use for us. And in particular at this show, our headline was multiband. And it's the fact that we now have multiple frequency bands within a single radio and across multiple form factors. That's something that we developed through our participation in the DIU's Blue US program. And I don't think we would have done it if it wasn't for that program. But again, developing that multi-band capability, we brought it across to our commercial offering as well. And that was really what we had on display.
Well, we're going to dive deep into all of this here in a second, Amol. But before we do, I'd love to play this video and have you talk us through it.
Sure, yeah. Oh yeah, this is a video that we put together, really reflecting this idea. It's it goes through kind of catalogs across the fact that we do design data links, but we're agnostic to the platform or the use case in a way of we do design to be best performing or capable for those use cases, but it really can be used in any kind of way. So what you're seeing up top was one of our defense-oriented UAV customers. Now that one's FreeFly, that's more commercially focused with a dual use component. This is an autonomous convoy that's being done by a customer of ours out of Canada. And in fact, actually, they're doing it both as a convoy for military use, as well as that was a logging environment that you saw there. These are AMRs, as you see, really exploding in use. And then the public safety side of things, we're actually working with some fire departments in a handheld use case of our radios that give that ability to basically use like situational awareness tools like ATAC in the field, just with a handheld environment.
So we're talking about drones, we're talking about robots, all, really even, I imagine, unmanned ground vehicles,
Sure.
right? The quadruped spot type dogs and networking all of these. And, Amol, this isn't your first rodeo. I mean, you've alluded to this. So I want to be clear because for some people, you guys are a newer name. And I agree. I think the Blue DIU Blue Framework Program kind of put your name really, really on the map. But well before that, you were making these radios. So can you very briefly just kind of give us the history there of the company?
Yeah, absolutely. So we actually go back to like 1999 when we started, and our CEO had the idea that Wi-Fi was being used in relatively limited capacities when it was just focused on indoor. And And so his idea was that we can go much longer ranges and it can be used for these industrial use cases. And so that's kind of where we started. We were focused on that for a while until actually saw a transition over from making the actual access points that would sit and be used for these long range outdoor applications to making components that went inside of other machinery or other things. And as we saw the advent of robotics really picking up, we realized that our customers were having to build relatively the same tech stack and actually solve the same problems over and over again, things that actually we realized fell in our wheelhouse, which is when we developed the mesh rider radio lineup. And what we basically did there was we took our advanced RF and networking performance and capability over those long ranges, even our ability to change frequencies to be able to achieve all the different commercial and licensed band offerings, and put it into a smaller package with our Mesh Rider operating system, which provides some intelligence when you're putting it into like a robotics application that, you're changing orientation, pitch, direction, and it goes a super long distance. And that's really what was the core of this for us. We also have always had a focus really on commercial, and as you mentioned, the Blue program, that was really what kind of brought us forward, because I think in the drone industry at large, the development of commercially focused drone applications is still going. But for the last several years, it's really had a focus where basically who is allowed to fly, and it's largely been, defense had the permission to fly. And now that we see the FAA and things like that coming through with rules that allow for more commercial applications or flights and drone delivery, things like that, I think you're hearing what we were doing on that side for a while anyway, but because we're able to span both sides, I think that that's definitely helped us in the most recent years.
You raise a great point. I've, having been in the military myself, I feel like the military are always early first
Right.
adopters, first users of new technologies. They prove out these concepts. And, Amal, just looking around at what is happening in the world, I think obviously the Russia-Ukrainian war has kind of upped the need for commercial technologies. We're seeing them on the battlefield, but not just any commercial technologies, right? We even saw this in the Russia-Ukraine war. They need to be secure. They need to be reliable. And, Congress saw this coming before this conflict. And that's why they put out Section 848 of the National Defense Authorization Act, because there were concerns about certain countries' drones and components, and, where that information and data was going, and how secure it was. So you guys got involved early. I think you were one of the first, right, in the original Blue UAS program. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, and actually, the way that it worked out was this goes back, I don't know, like 2019 or so. Maybe it was early 2020, but we started talking with DIU at that time, and we got their list of requirements of really what they wanted to design their data links and their comms networks around. And so we took that, and we actually had an offering of our first round, basically, of the Mesh Rider radios, which were single band options. We had the ability to actually produce them in all of the commercial and all licensed federal band options as well, but they just operated in a single band at a time. And we did design around like form factor compatibility, so that it was really a drop-in replacement, but still you needed to order a different radio if you wanted to go from L band to S band or things like that. Then we got that feedback or the direction from DIU about wanting to cover those M1 through M6 ranges. And again, we could have approached it as 6 radios that cover those 6 bands. But through that development, we should realize we could further swap optimize our radio, make it a little bit smaller than the other one was. The other one was.
And we're talking for those, the uninitiated, and I know most of this crowd is pretty, by the way, we have a great crowd out there on YouTube. I know folks are on my LinkedIn. So I just want to give a shout out to y'all for watching. And also feel free to jump into the chat. Like, tell us where you're from, ask any questions of Amal, and give us positive encouragement. We love all of that. But I'm sorry to interrupt, Amal. I wanted to mention that we are live and there are actually people out there. So.
Okay. And also, as you've actually prompted me before, to mention the acronyms that we use. SWAP standing for small, size, weight, and power requirements. And so we further reduced the size of this one being the Helix in our mini OEM form factor. And in this one radio, we're actually covering all 6 frequency bands together. That's what I was mentioning at the top, where we developed that multi-band capability with this RFQ. And so we actually got sponsorship from DIU to develop this Helix radio. You had mentioned Ukraine just a minute ago, and one of the advantages of multiband, besides just kind of having more tools in your toolkit, having the additional frequency bands in a single radio, which basically means less integration work, really zero integration work to be able to achieve that, versus before you had to swap out radios. In addition, it gives a tactical advantage, especially through the latest firmware release where we have a spectrum manager, where what it basically allows someone to do is in flight, in a mission, the radios will be constantly seeking for interference, and within a band will move over to a better channel within the band if there's a lot of interference coming in. And actually, if you're using the multi-band capability, jump from a one band altogether to a better performing band. And so having that is something that just can actually provide a lot of tactical ability. It's something where when you are facing some jamming in a contested environment, where it's just really swamping one of the frequency bands, you have that ability to just move over. And that's actually why we have Helix in particular going to Ukraine quite a bit. We're working with local Ukrainian drone OEMs, and that multi-band capability is a real tactical advantage for them.
Now, Amol, the one you're holding up, or if you could hold it up again, is this the mini?
This is the mini
form factor?
This is the,
and that was the little video we just showed. Now, this also comes in a nano version, is that
That's
correct?
right, that's this guy here.
Oh my gosh, look at the difference.
Turn around so you're facing both the antenna ports. Here we go. Yeah,
okay.
It's even smaller. And basically what we had done is, again, we developed to this, and just this gets a little bit in the technical weeds, but these have 2 antenna ports. And again, for really long range applications, we're talking about like 40 kilometers plus that we're having high bandwidth, like HD video being streamed. You want 2x2 MIMO, you want 2 antennas, because it just gives you a lot more resiliency of the link. With the intelligence of the Mesh Rider OS, it's just helping make sense of non-optimal signal paths, things like that. But when you have a really, really size and weight constrained platform, usually we're seeing it in things that are being deployed indoors. So they're really small airframes or small robotics, but they're also range limited applications. That's where the Nano is really designed for those types of systems.
All right, so we covered a number of things with DIU, and I want to get to a video here in a second, but before we do, so we hit swap, size, weight, and power.
Yep.
We hit the multiple bands, 6 and 1. You kind of alluded to it, but I want to touch on a little bit more this concept of interoperability.
Sure.
Because you specifically designed this to be plug and play and hardware agnostic, I think were the words you used.
That's right.
Was that a blue requirement at the time?
That one was like a preference. I don't know if it was specifically on the RFQ to require that build, but I think it was something that they had a lot of interest in ours to begin with. So DIU's program altogether, their mandate is really seeking out in the commercial space, what are the leading technologies that could be used by the military. And that's really what they're looking for. And so dual use is really that mandate. For us, as again, like a kind of design ethos or within the DNA of our products, we actually build off of Linux. We build off of OpenWRT. We like to stick close to the open source community because we see it as an advantage. I mean, that's such an invested community, and it means that the technology is evolving so rapidly. And so to be able to leverage that and also contribute back to that makes us feel like we're always keeping our radios really on the cutting edge. And so having that, and we build off of a Qualcomm chipset, and they're a close partner of ours. Doing that kind of stuff feels like we're kind of expanding our ecosystem and getting to leverage just really, again, that most cutting edge of the latest technology to provide the best performing radios, the best networking technology back.
And we talked about resilience, the fact that it can, let's call it band hop as needed, sniff out the right band if there's some problem on a particular one that it's operating on. But I want to talk about security because I think that's inherent in resilience. And you also built this to a very specific and kind of future-proofed standard, if you will. So tell us a little bit about
Yeah,
that.
so all of our radios have always been designed to 256-bit AES encryption. You do have the option, again, in commercial application. If you don't need it, you could select it within the GUI to be 128-bit. But with the Helix lineup of radios, we actually went further, and we incorporated the FIPS 140-3 encryption level. And so to be compliant to that wasn't a requirement for the Blue program, at least not yet. But we saw it as future-proof design. It's something similar to why we leverage those open source kind of components, and why we work in that regard, where it's like, we know that what we design now and what we deploy at this level, we want it to be the best of what it can be now, but we also know that we want to keep designing forward, and we want to have something that will always continue to meet the needs, and it won't be obsolete in market, but really we can hopefully stay ahead of that.
Well, and for everybody out there that doesn't know about the cryptographic module standards, they're NIST developed. This 140-3 is kind of the next one on the horizon. The current one is 140-2, and it does not officially sunset until 2026. So you guys are already looking several years out to make sure that when that switch gets flipped, that you're already compliant. So I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
Now, Amol, we have a little video of one of your, I'll just call it government side collaborations. I know it's with PDW, and I know they're dual use, but why don't you walk us through this video?
Sure, yeah. It was a lot of fun working with them on this. They are just great partners, and I think they're doing something really amazing. So I got to see them out. They're based out of Huntsville, Alabama, just about less than a month ago. And what we were doing is we were doing some trials to be able to prove out some of the latest technology that we were just talking about. So one, they're building within their tech stack, they're using our Helix mesh rider radios in the mini form factor. They have a slightly larger bird, so they're able to accommodate that because they're also going for larger distances and longer flight times. What we're kind of seeing here is a demonstration of using our radios in their mesh configuration for network extension, for range extension. So something that can be a real challenge just in environment is when you need to overcome the physical environment of like a mountain, or the trees, where you would have otherwise an obstruction of line of sight. And so by being able to keep our radios in a mesh mode, you actually have that ability to extend that range by having a middle flyer actually be that network extension. Then this one is actually showing that spectrum manager in action. Again, it's something that we're releasing on the latest release. So what you're going to see here is what was a beta on it. So you'll see a manual selection here versus in the release that we have now, it's an automatic selection. And that's what he's doing here. So basically, we were jamming the signal. And again, for this trial, we actually just used another radio to swamp the data link and just put in a lot of noise. We saw the pixelation of the video. You saw him change the frequency band, and then you saw the video come back. And so that's really what that is to show. But again, all of this has now been automated. And that was actually, again, back like how we future-proof. Like the moment we developed the ability to house multiple frequency bands in one single radio, we were already planning for this, because we knew that this is what this is building towards. And then actually, even from where we are now, we're already thinking ahead to what we want to release, which will be a dual operation where you can actually use two frequency bands simultaneously.
What, to like control multiple things?
You can control multiple things. You can have concurrent networks. Even in that serial extension, the range extension that we saw that first scenario, in just like a standard range extension property, that you lose throughput every hop that you make. Because if you're operating on a single frequency band, it has to send and receive at every node in a serial configuration. So you're losing that throughput. You're still getting HD video because we start with enough. We start at 80 megabits per second. So you have more than enough in the pipeline. But if you actually do a range extension configuration where you're taking advantage of two frequency bands, you can send and receive on the separate bands. and you actually have this ability to extend range without any throughput hit. So these are just things that we're thinking about, and we already have in the works. Just the moment we hit one of these milestones, we know that we're on to the next.
And even for this one that you're speaking of, Amol, the idea would be at some point to make that also kind of autonomous.
That's right.
Insofar. Okay. Well, I'll tell you, anytime you can reduce operator workload,
Totally.
you know, especially in high stress environments. I mean, even in a normal environment, like a commercial industrial, there could be stressful moments, I imagine, but like on the
Yeah.
battlefield, you know, in the heat of the moment, to be able to have that capacity to just, you know, it's going to, you know, it's reliable, it's going to switch the right band, or it's going to switch over to the other, you know, radio, if you will. That's
Yeah.
awesome. I love that. Well, let's talk about that commercial sector, because, you know, obviously the success you've had early on in the commercial market translated to this incredible 6-band in one technology that you created for DIU, that now you've kind of repackaged, repurposed on the commercial side in all of these different form factors. So tell us about your offerings for the commercial sector specifically.
Yeah, so thank you. On the commercial side of things, exactly, we took the same multiband capability, but then we've brought it across to the commercial frequency band. So we've always offered this again in the single frequency options, but then within our mini OEM form factor, we now house both the 900 megahertz and 2.4 gigahertz frequencies together. So now basically you have two unlicensed frequency bands in a single radio. What that means, again, for like a customer of ours, like say FreeFly, that does a lot more commercial operations. We have others that are also doing drone delivery, things like that. There's pros and cons to every frequency band. The way that we actually achieve our frequencies, we see it as a bit of a secret sauce because we actually leverage the Wi-Fi chipset. So we're able to take advantage of that high throughput of that frequency band. But then say converting down to 900 megahertz, we're maintaining that throughput, but taking advantage of the fact that 900 megahertz has a longer range and greater penetration. So like through obstacles or buildings or things like that. And so what we see here is actually the ability to have both of those frequency bands here. You could be operating in say 2.4 gigahertz, but then you get over in an urban environment or some kind of place where there's a bunch of Wi-Fi noise that could get into the data link, especially as you're going over like tens of kilometers. That's where the radio is having that ability to switch over automatically to 900 megahertz is an advantage, because you're basically just ensuring that you have a reliable data link. It's kind of like to what you just said, where operator ease. In fact, like I've been thinking about it a lot. We think about it to the terms that end users, the ones who are actually flying these drones for a specific reason, a specific mission, or a job, they actually don't care about the technology. It's really like even a drone is really just a way to carry the camera often in the sky, and it's that data, it's that video.
Or the sensor, whatever sensor.
But it's whatever that data is, that video feed, that sensor data. That's what they need in real time and reliably. And so our data links, they don't even really often, these end users care how it's working, but they just need it to work. And so that's what we're designing around. We wanted to make it as easy to use, as easy to build in, as simple to integrate, and so that you don't have extra integration work if you even want to deploy globally. Because again, back to the commercial variant, 900 megahertz is really good in the US, and it's available in addition to 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi. But in Europe, it's really power limited. So it's not as great of an option. But we have customers who design platforms that deploy globally. And so even if they're not going to be using in a dual, in both frequency bands to be able to multi-hop, to hop between the bands, they still have that option to then operate in a single band, but without having to do extra integration work. So all of that kind of thing to then get to the end user and them to be able to use the system that they bought for the reason that they bought it and put it into market without having to really think about all of these details underneath. Like another version of that we actually have is our handheld version of our radio. This is the radio itself, which is our handheld
So you just
version.
took that apart.
Yeah, this is the battery that I was going to show. So this is just an attachable battery that really makes it a handheld version. This also could be vehicle mounted or mounted as a fixed access point in a building if you're building out a network infrastructure. But with the attachable battery, it becomes a handheld option. And back to our intro video, you saw public safety guys, and that's who this is really designed for. And really, they're doing a really important job. Especially, we're based out of California. We work with some of the firefighters out here who would use something like this in a wildfire setting, right, where they operate often into disconnected environments or beyond available networking, like LTE network environments. And really, what they want to use is ATAC on their phone. It's a situational awareness app that means that they just have a lot more awareness of where they are and where the people around them are, and it makes their jobs a lot safer, a lot more effective. When they move beyond available network, they lose that ability altogether. But with our radio, you have this handheld network that they basically can bring with them. And so even if they're not connected back to the cloud, they're connected to each other in real time and in the field. And actually, with the range extension capability of this, or the network extension capability, having this be one of these radios left in the engine, you actually have that LTE coverage get extended across the mesh network. But the reason why I started telling you about them is, again, they don't care about how it's being connected, whether it's LTE or our radio. They just want it to work. And we really see that. And they don't want to have to configure the radios. They don't have to deal with those details. And so really designing around that idea.
Well, and you mentioned the kind of wildland firefighting use case, if you will. I mean, Amal, the reality is that literally the world has been on fire for like the last several years, right? So,
Right.
Once again, it's not just the firefighters out in California. We're talking globally. And you
That's right.
guys just released a radio in Japan, is that right?
Yeah. So actually, really quick, just on that note about this particular
Yeah.
thing, we actually work with the AWS disaster response team because they are exactly globally deploying. And what they wanted to do is have like a rapidly deployable network in their kit. And they're actually taking full advantage of the way that we envision our big idea is that you're using any of these radios that we've designed in their various form factors. So the small ones that would go into a drone, the handheld ones in hand, in the vehicle mounted version in a vehicle, and you're really getting to take advantage of a really advanced, diverse network to do some big job. So these guys work with NGOs at the AWS disaster response team, and they're going to places where there's no available network or there's no reliable network for them to use these situational awareness tools. So then they bring their network with them, and they have a drone in the sky, and they're actually creating these bubbles of connectivity. And one group would be within that bubble, and the next group is adjacent to them. And then with an overlapping network coverages, they're kind of extending and creating this very large area network. So that's exactly that with the global deployment. Sorry, your question was about Japan. That actually is something that, again, it's actually been our focus since we focused on drones. And so Japan designated a swath of spectrum specifically for robotics use. And so again, our ability to have radios in different frequency bands, we took that range and we were able to actually frequency shift and create that radio that serves that market. So we're working closely with some customers in Japan for that. In fact, India is also a really large adopter, and they have a lot of drones in market, and we work with a lot of customers out of there. And so everyone kind of has their different set of requirements, things like that. So one, our radios, just even in the GUI setting, the country of operation, it'll match the local requirements for those, in terms of like power output, like I mentioned with Europe, power limiting 900 megahertz. But also we're just looking to create offerings that would then best be utilized for these different sectors of industry, like I mentioned, public safety, or global markets altogether.
Yeah, and warehouses, it's funny. We talked on our full crew just a couple weeks ago about an article that outlined how the robotics industry is really kind of exploding from a, kind of a cash infusion standpoint and use standpoint, especially in Asia. Japan was one of those countries, South Korea, as you mentioned, India. So, the fact that you're able to, as you said, kind of grab these different areas of spectrum and modify the radios to operate in all of these places is really key. We also in the U.S. the Federal Communications Commission, the FCC, recently put out a notice of public rulemaking on potentially designating specific spectrum for drones. Because you were talking about these unlicensed bands that we currently operate in. So let's assume that that comes to pass, Amol. I assume then that your radios can be modified to take into account those particular bands as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, you at the top of this, you had asked us about just our history and how that kind of brought us to where we are now. It's really that our CEO, CTO, just had this great ability to kind of see the need to service or provide an offering in these various frequency bands. And so, again, I did mention it, but how we leverage Wi-Fi technology, leverage Wi-Fi chipset to then create these different bands so that we're taking advantage of the best of both. That's something that we continue to have, and it's something that I think really helps us differentiate because it's a fairly quick, or it's something that we're very good at. That I guess I should put it that way. And so as we see those opportunities of different set of spectrum, and we have actually people using it, we're able to take what we have and create an offer for that pretty quickly.
Well, and you mentioned earlier, Qualcomm being one of those partners that you integrate with. Partner integration is really a huge part of your business model. So tell us a little bit more about your kind of two-part partner integration and support model.
Yeah, and actually, again, thank you for stopping by our booth at Xponential this year. You probably saw that literally on display, because what we really see in the position we kind of take here, we make integrated components for the most part, except for the handheld version of our radio. And so really we're in collaboration with other partners, and we see our role is really providing the best networking solutions so that our customers don't have to worry about that piece. So they're really building out some of the most advanced technology, some of the most advanced network robotics technology, to be able to, there's been a dream about when we're going to have all these robots kind of working alongside humans and doing these specific jobs. It's our customers that are really working towards that future. And it's really exciting to be a part of that. But within that happening, they need a reliable networking solution. And we've had, through our journey here, like seen people try to either leverage a standard Wi-Fi or in an AMR setting, and it just doesn't hold up to the requirements. It's like putting a race car on a dirt road kind of thing, an F1 car. And that's really where we come in, is like, we know that for that future to be possible, you need that reliable networking solution. And we have just focused on that for so long. So we want to take that burden off of our customers. But for really this to come forward to the market, is really in collaboration with those customers. And so as well as ecosystem partners. We work, what you saw on display was PDW. We saw the video earlier. They had their drone on display. We also had the FreeFly Astro, as well as the Teal 2 from Teal. And those are all just examples of partners that we really enjoy working with. They're doing such amazing stuff, specifically in building these drone platforms for big use cases. And then we also had ecosystem partners that you would have seen, like Modal AI, UXV. And what we like showing with that also is just that that's one of those UXV controllers. And man, these guys are really fun to work with. And they're just, they were at the show as well. And just to see their lineup of technology was like spilling out of their booth because they've made so many things. And they're fun to work with also because they just rapidly prototype. And so we're able to kind of take an idea that we're hearing and kind of be an offering around it. And so what we wanted to show there, though, specifically on the drone side, these are the integrations. These are radios. These are platforms that have their radios built into them. But then on the ecosystem side, that's the Teal 2 from Teal. And they specifically are taking that platform and designing towards Blue UAS's SRR program. And so to do that, they're integrating our radio to have it be Blue compliant, We've also, through our testing, seen significant lift in performance, things like that. And so again, it's something that's really exciting to work with them and see that progression and that development. FreeFly is one of those companies, I did mention them, but they represent, that's their Astro and that dual use, where again, they're starting with their commercial variant, and then they're able to then maintain, because it's the exact same footprint between our commercial variant and the Helix configuration. And by having an offering that then can include our Helix configuration, they have a Blue compliant system as well.
Yeah, I saw Free Fly at Geo Week as well back in February in Denver, where they were talking about how they use that for photogrammetry and geospatial,
Yeah.
applications. And so, and you mentioned modal AI. I wrote an article that was super fun. That's, I think, when I first met you, and Doodle Labs Amol was working with modal AI on this
Yeah.
beating drones and robots article that I believe AUVSI published as well. And they were at the show too, Lauren and the team there had a
Yeah.
booth as well.
And they've been really great to work with. And actually, I didn't finish saying was to mention exactly partners like them. You would have also seen Apterion UXV, but showing our partnership with them. And again, Modal is just a great example of this. It's really one of those ideas of, rising tide lifts all ships, where our radios actually are just both component level things that go into systems like the Teal platforms and PDW, et cetera, et cetera. Actually, PDW is an example where both Modal AI and their Voxel and our Helix radios are together in the housing. And to show that integration and the work that we've done to make sure that we have really well working components together is really to, again, look at that customer and say, we know what they're going to have to build around when they're building a system. So they're going to need a data link. They're going to need a flight controller. So us looking at those partners and them doing the same is really just in service of trying to make that easier for the customer when they start to look at how they're going to design their platform. Whether they've already designed in the data link with our radios, or they're already designed in the flight controller, it's easier to kind of look around what you've started to cement in and build your stack from there. And that's really what it's about.
Well, I was going to say, they say niches make riches, but I'll tell you, if you're in a niche and you're on an island because you're not working with other people, you're not going to get rich. Like that's not going to work. It's absolutely better together. I think the companies that and your booth wasn't the only one, right, Amal? I think you looked around and saw so many different organizations, companies had multiple different technologies in one booth because
Right.
it's just, I think, what I saw at this show, and I think you would agree, is the evolution of the industry to the point now where it's not single product, single booth, single use.
Yeah.
It's dual use. It's multiple, as you call them, ecosystem and integration partners all working together. And I agree. I think that's what's going to make the difference for this industry. So we only have a couple minutes left, and I want to make sure, we talked a little bit about what's new, kind of what's next. But I want to talk about, is there a connection, because one of the things on a lot of people's minds out there is, how is remote ID going to play into all of these things, right? The future of autonomy is reimagine what autonomy looks like. Drone operators are supposed to be RID compliant by the September. That's only a couple months out. How, if at all, will remote ID mesh, for lack of a better term, with your radios?
Great question. So actually, in our commercial variant, we already have a remote ID offering. And so it's the 900 megahertz and 2.4 gigahertz version operating within the 2.4 gigahertz band. We have a separate ping from our Mesh Rider link that pings the ID information that's required for remote ID. So we have that capability in place right now for people using the commercial offering. Obviously, guys who are using the Helix radios for defense applications, it's the opposite of what they want to do. But it's something that we see those standardizations coming through a lot. In fact, actually, one of the interesting use cases related to remote ID, but a little bit separate, was someone who came to us from, they're working with the FAA. And I think that just as we see the deployment of drones really hitting market, we're going to see a lot more drones in the sky. That's where a requirement for remote ID comes from, right? Where if you're going to be able to take advantage of using these drones for cool things in relatively urban environments or overpopulation, in commercial settings, you need to know who is it. Like I think I saw just even another article that the one of those, I think it was either Gatwick or Heathrow Airport was shut down temporarily again from another drone flying near too close to the airspace, airfield. So anyway, those kinds of things happen, and being able to find out who they are is important. The FAA consultant had come to us specifically looking for how can you kind of read the noise or the interference that's in the space and actually use that to find out who might be coming in and occupying the space. And it's actually using that spectrum manager that I mentioned to you, where right now we've really designed it around that idea of being able to see where does the interference come from, jump to a better operating band. But by just flying with that spectrum manager on, you're actually able to also then just see, oh, this is where that noise comes from. So it already works for that. We didn't design for that specific use case, but that kind of thing is coming in. And the last thing to mention is like we actually spoke with some folks over from NASA who are specifically taking the mandate of trying to figure out how, if there's going to be a lot more drones deployed, how can we make sure that we're keeping track of like who's flying where and just the interference, things like that. And again, the wildfire connection here in California, there's so many times that you hear stories about those helicopters that are flying over wildfires that can't go because a drone happens to be in that space. And so, yeah, we see that a lot. I think as we see things deploy and there's more drones in the sky, we're going to see a lot of these requirements come out.
Well, and you're also alluding to right there UAS traffic management, right, or UTM. And in fact, NASA is doing trials in the context of UTM in the context of wildland firefighting for that very reason, deconflicting the airspace in those very high traffic and high stakes environments of wildfires. So, all right, we're getting close to the end here, Amol. I want to make sure you have an opportunity to talk about any big announcements, what's next, and certainly how people can reach you. So I'm going to give you the last couple minutes here to go ahead and monologue and kind of close out our show with what you want to leave people with here.
Okay, well, great. I really appreciate it. I think we actually covered all of that stuff, and as we kind of talked about just getting into the show, it's just a really exciting time for us. We're seeing more and more people getting to use our radios and really seeing that proof of concept where we've designed our entire radio offering to provide that highest level of performance. But we also, again, having that focus on commercial as well as defense, have really priced it to scale and to price it to be able to be accessible on the commercial and even public safety side of things, just folks that don't really always have those defense budgets. And that's with intention. We're really bought into this future where there's collaborative robotics working alongside people, and that's why we even created the level of all the form factors that we've designed around, so you can have that advanced network be able to rapidly deploy or be built around some kind of infrastructure to be able to take advantage of doing those kinds of things, and then actually be able to drive your race car properly because you have the right technology behind it. We're really excited about where we are now. It was a great show for us, and we loved the reception that we got there. We're looking forward to the future and having more people be able to take advantage of what we've been working on. We always work with mindset also of we're constantly evolving, we're constantly developing towards the next thing. And along that route, we're taking in customer feedback that we know that we're addressing their needs and making it a better option for what people are looking to do. So if anyone is interested in chatting with us, I invite you to get in touch with us through our website. There's a form there that you can start the conversation. And then everything for us is really a consultation to begin with, where we're taking in information about what people are working on and seeing what the best fit option is that we can offer, and then really taking it from there. So hopefully we can do that. Our website is doodlelabs.com. Should hopefully be sticky enough or simple enough. We've heard the name stands out.
Absolutely. And, great news information on there, all the latest partnerships that Doodle is involved in and integration. So absolutely check out their website. Real quick, before we sign off, you were just at AUVSI. What's next? Where's the next stop, Amol, on your conference train where people might be able to actually touch base with you in person as well?
That's a great question. We're actually still kind of figuring out what the rest of the year looks like. We probably be at commercial UAV in some capacity. I'm still figuring that out. There's another side of this that we are just really focused actually on doing a lot more demonstrations and internal testing that we would like to invite actually our partners to. We've already talked with them about it. So kind of filled up a lot of our calendar to be able to hit the desert or hit the forest, go to these different environments and really put our products to the test alongside our customers' products and be able to do some great things like that, even in front of some end users. So there's a lot of what we've been focusing on, but we'll definitely be at commercial UAV to some capacity. And again, actually, we'll probably figure out some more things. We'll probably put on the website.
All right, very good. And if you haven't subscribed to Doodle's YouTube channel, you may want to do that. We also did a really cool, speaking of demonstrations, a demo video that's on the live tab there. So check that out. But we are out of time, and it was so great to talk to you again. And I look forward to seeing more great things from Doodle Labs over the coming years. So we are out here, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Don.